Hi, and welcome to Financial Minds Meet the Experts. I'm your host, Jaime Agostino. In case you're new to listening to our show, this is where we're joined by financial industry experts to talk about topics, trends, and themes that credit union professionals need to know about. Elder financial abuse. It happens a lot more than we hear about, which is why today I have Vizo Financial's Cindy Hagan joining me to talk about it. Cindy, welcome back. I know this is a topic that's near and dear to your heart, and we've spoken about it before. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Jaime. I'm happy to be back. And as you said, while I don't like talking about this subject, it really is a passion of mine.
All right, so let's jump right in. We've talked about elder financial exploitations in the past, and we know about some of the concerns, but what actually happens when an employee has a concern at the credit union about an elderly member? What can they do?
And this is really a big challenge. And I'm so glad we're talking about some opportunities and options, because that's the challenge. Especially at a financial institution, they're very sensitive to the fact that that information is very private. And so I think people can be tentative about what they are allowed to do, what steps they can take. And of course, always the first step would be to talk to your member. Probably the teller line isn't the place to have that discussion, but talking to your member is certainly the first step. It's often a suggestion to reach out to Adult Protective Services or the Office of Aging, but that can feel sometimes like that's a big leap from I'm a little concerned about what's happening in someone's account to I'm turning this over to some larger authority. So it can feel kind of like overkill, like they're doing more than the situation might warrant at that point in time.
All right, so what about if the employee is right to be concerned about that the member is in trouble, what do they do next? Then what?
Well, it often a member or the employee does recognize that something is not quite right. They're doing transactions that are out of character. There's activity that just isn't consistent with that member's previous activity. And there can be lots of reasons. They may be a victim of a scam. They may be having diminished capacity, and someone in their life is taking advantage of that diminished capacity. So there can be lots of reasons, and there are tools and resources out there. And I'm excited that we can share those, because I don't think in our busy days, it's something that we keep as a resource. And so it's neat to be able to provide those to folks now, rather than in the heat of the moment when the crisis erupts kind of situation. So one of the things that I love is on the Department of Justice has a very large and comprehensive elder justice initiative that we'll be able to provide that link here. And I think there are lots and lots of tools there. But one of the things that I really like, they call it a neighborhood map. You'll go in, choose a state, and then it looks just like a map. There are different buildings pictured on there. And it's things like Adult Protective Services, the counseling services, food programs are on there. And when you click on whatever building you're looking for, it provides a link to those resources in your state. I know that sometimes there are some of our member credit unions are right on a border. So while my physical building might be in one state, my member might technically be living in another. So it's kind of nice to be able to have that ability to search for those types of resources in one site. So I really like that. It's a nice tool to be able to start the process of where might I direct my concern regarding this elderly member.
All right. And as Cindy said, she's supplying those links for us. So we're going to put that in the description of today's podcast, so you'll be able to access those links at your convenience.
Thanks, Jaime. And, another spot on that same website, the Justice Department's Elder Justice Initiative, they've got a roadmap And that tool is very helpful. It can be used by your member, could be used by a family member if they're trying to support them. It can be used by your institution as well. It's really helpful because it walks you right through the steps. So the first thing it asks you is who caused the loss, whether it was somebody you knew, someone at your nursing home, somebody, an unknown person. And then once you choose that button, it takes you to more questions. So if you chose your nursing home, for instance, then it's going to ask you what happened. And there can be all kinds of things from, a billing issue to a actual theft, or your benefits were being misdirected. And then when you choose what happened, then it gives you specific resources, who to contact, what next steps to expect, which I think can be really helpful, again, for any of those people accessing this, whether it's your staff or your member or a family member that's utilizing that. It can be really helpful to know what can we expect to happen next, what might be the next step in this process. So that's another really neat tool. And again, both of those are on the Justice Department's website.
Okay. Trusted contact. I've heard it before, but what does it mean?
Well, to be frank, most of the time that I've heard it used previously is in investment types of services. And it's kind of been a little more common in that circumstance, but we're hearing it a lot more in the credit union space. What it is having your member designate someone as his or her trusted contact. So it's not necessarily someone who is has access to transact on the account. So it's not necessarily a joint owner or a POA, although it could be. But typically it's a friend or family member. The suggestion is usually that it be someone who is near, who would have a good sense of your living arrangements, of your current physical state, so that if the credit union sees this kind of a concern or activity on your account that they're concerned about, and they want to reach out to you and can't get a hold of you, then they would utilize the trusted contact to say, trying to get a hold of Cindy, the information I have on file is not accurate any longer. Are you aware of? So they're certainly not able to have very specific discussions about your transactional activity, but they can be a resource. If they feel like you're maybe caught up in a scam, they may be someone to whom you would listen, or be able to be more honest and upfront about the circumstances of what's going on. Because generally speaking, these folks are either embarrassed that they've been caught up in a scam, or they're still frightened. They're still right in the depths of it, and they're concerned that someone is going to be, accessing things they shouldn't, or someone's going to come to harm, or whatever the scam is. So it can be helpful to have a trusted contact provide that. Now, it's not as simple as just saying, oh yeah, call Jamie if I have a problem. You do want to talk to your legal department and make sure this is structured appropriately. It's the kind of thing that your member should be able to revoke at some point, but it's something we haven't been doing, but can provide a fabulous service, especially for an elderly member who does not have an advocate close by. So often an adult child is states away and can't be there, and may not be quite as hands-on as someone living more closely. So I think it's a tool we can utilize, because again, sometimes you just have that slight worry. There's just some transactional activity. It's kind of unusual. Maybe it does make sense, and maybe it is accurate, or, the contact information. We're not always as good about that as we should be, to be sure that that's always current, and someone can not have a house phone anymore, and now they've got a cell phone, but all we have on their information file is the old house phone. So there are lots of reasons that can be very beneficial. So it's just something I think worth consideration and bringing into the topic.
All right, just another tool to put in that toolbox to help the members. All right.
Absolutely.
Are there any training programs for staff to help them identify signs or learn the proper way to help members in trouble?
There are some really great tools out there, and you certainly can Google away on that one. The NCUA has some things out there, but I happened to be at a conference and heard a speaker from Michigan who was talking about an initiative that their Institute for Gerontology has. So this is an academic institution that is trying to gather information. And in the process, they've created some great tools, some assessment tools for members, for staff to be able to facilitate those conversations, utilize some of the screening tools. There are some really neat tools out there. And I've talked to a credit union that went through the training and felt significantly more confident in their interaction with members, that it didn't feel so awkward or difficult to do. And so that's that's kind of a fun one. I like their name. It's the olderadultnestegg.com. And it's again a fairly large comprehensive website that's out there, and that financial professionals can use. It's all free because they're looking for data. So that's kind of a win-win situation. They're gathering more data as financial professionals utilize their tools, but then there are also some pretty neat tools for financial institutions to use. And another great one is AARP. They've got some really great tools and resources out there for financial professionals. And just like they have some really interesting thoughts, like having slightly different size, color, visibility on a debit card. When folks get a little older, it can be confusing as to which card is which and what belongs where. So it can be really very simple changes or things considerations, I should say, to make in terms of how you want to be helping your adult members be comfortably navigating the changes and still be fairly involved in their own banking situation. So both of those are really great tools. Again, they're free, and I would always encourage staff to discuss it, to make it a topic that's on people's minds, but tools can make them feel so much more comfortable in addressing those situations.
Yeah, absolutely. What about training then for the credit union members themselves to help them learn how to steer clear of these potential exploitations?
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the most proactive things we can do. And that's one of the most challenging because it's an ever evolving landscape. When someone's trying to, specifically scammers, they're savvy to utilizing tools that someone's unfamiliar with. They're catching them off guards. AI now, it used to be you'd get a call from someone purporting to be a grandchild and you'd think, how did they not know their own grandchild's voice? Sometimes with AI, it is their grandchild's voice now. So it's the techniques get more and more complicated in advance. So just being proactive in some of those training tools can help. Certainly there are any of the resources that I just talked about have some tools and suggestions. Medicare's website has some great tools and resources there. There are often either Department of Aging, I know in Pennsylvania that our Department of Aging, they will go out and do fraud bingo at an adult community, whether it's a gathering of some kind or at a home. They'll go out and play bingo, and it gives them an opportunity to talk about those different kinds of scams as part of the process. So it's more interesting than just somebody with a slideshow, but it's a little more interactive. And so there are lots of fun ways. You as an institution certainly could come up with your own on that, whether it's fraud just in general or different things to be looking out for. So yeah, I thought that was a fun idea. So there are tools out there. There are outreaches that will be That doesn't have to necessarily be your credit union doing, but there are opportunities to partner with some other organizations who are trying to make that outreach. But you can just have things on your website or in your lobby, because that's a population more likely to be in your lobby. Your 22-year-old member is probably not so much in the lobby. They might see it on the mobile app rather than, but the fact that Social Security or the IRS doesn't send you a text message, and just little reminders to help folks stay safe, or that you aren't going to reach out and ask them for their Social Security number or their account number. You already have that. So things that seem obvious to us, it's just a good reminder sometimes for all of our membership.
Yeah, it really is. I think I've shared with you before, my in-laws are elderly, and they got a phone call one day from a gentleman claiming to be their grandson. And he was in an accident and he needed help, and they were going, needed money. And my father-in-law was like, oh, we'll get it. But I have to call my son because I have no way to get it. And as soon as they said that, promptly the phone hung up and got disconnected. And, my father-in-law then reached out to my husband, and he's like, oh, let me just call your grandson just to make sure everything's okay. And everything was fine. And they were being scammed. And, they were shaken up for a few days. Like, it's just because they thought their grandson was seriously hurt. And it's just the lengths that these scammers will go through, not just the financial, but the emotional aspects of it.
Absolutely.
Terrible.
And the thing is, that's happening to everyone. I mean, everyone across the age spectrum is getting that. They're trying to take advantage of us, but it's just frustrating to me that for that population who is not as comfortable with the technology, not as necessarily sharp, some of their capacity might be diminished, and they can be rattled, and all of us can certainly, but they can be rattled and pushed to a sense of urgency and concern that it's just it's unsettling. And that's part of our responsibility as financial institutions, to be that advocate for our members, to try and ask some of those questions when it clearly feels out of character. This member's never done a wire before, and suddenly they've got a wire and they have to do it right now. That's when you really want to try and put the brakes on and get those questions answered, and maybe, hopefully, I mean, you can't always persuade them, but hopefully keep them from suffering a loss.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. I certainly learned a lot today about elder financial abuse and the resources available. So I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today.
Always good to chat. And I hope the resources are beneficial to a listener, that they'll be able to find someplace new that they haven't been in, a tool that perhaps will be helpful in their institution.
All right. So again, those resources are in the description of today's episode. And speaking of this episode, the episode of Financial Minds Meet the Experts is brought to you by Vizo Financial's Small Credit Union Workshop. Small credit unions are the cornerstone of their local communities. Day in and day out, they are passionately serving their members and local organizations, which is why we at Vizo Financial find it so important to offer small credit unions workshops exclusively for them. On August 9th through the 10th, we're hosting our 2023 Small Credit Union Workshop designed for credit unions 25 million in assets and under. With this virtual 2-day event, our goal is to ensure that we are providing top-notch education that your credit union needs to have in order to navigate any of the challenges you may be facing in the current financial landscape. So please join us and your small credit union peers for this insightful educational opportunity. Information is available on Vizo Financial's website, www.vfccu.org. As always, thanks for listening and make it a great day.